Minimalism, an art movement formed in the late 40s and early 50s, was considered a response to abstract expressionism and modernism. It didn't take long for the concept to permeate other disciplines and industries, and still resonates with people to this day. Architecture, music, film, literature, and games have all incorporated varying degrees of minimalism, and today I'd like to focus on the 2001 cult classic, Eco. Hey everyone, it's Chris back again for another design video, this time to discuss the impact of minimalism, or subtracting design, as lead designer and director Fumito Ueda would call it. Let's have a look at how this impacted the development process of Eco, and how minimalism can be used effectively elsewhere. Released in 2001 in North America and Japan, and later in Europe in 2002, Eco, the story of a horned boy overpowered by a group of warriors, kidnapped and brought to an abandoned castle to be sacrificed. Fate would have it that he would manage to escape and befriend a mysterious girl named Yorda. They would become inseparable. Eco, the main protagonist in this story, would do everything in his power to protect her. Fighting off enemies is rudimentary, with more focus on protecting and bonding with Yorda, as well as problem solving as you work your way through the game. Developed initially as a PlayStation 1 game, the focus of game development shifted over on the release and continued popularity of the PlayStation 2. As impressive as it is to see running on an original PlayStation, there's no doubt developing and releasing it on the PlayStation 2 had major benefits. Throughout the development process of Eco, Ueda would often employ a technique called subtractive design, wanting to remove as many design elements as possible in a bid to reduce distraction while amplifying core elements of the experience. The user interface is non-existent. You won't find health meters, point markers, or a heads-up display with a compass suggesting the direction that you should take. Eco features none of these. It's entirely up to the player to go at whatever pace they wish and explore. It goes further, however. Step outside the castle interior for the first time, and you're greeted with howling winds, faint birdsong, and the patter of your own footsteps. There's a distinct lack of NPCs, dialogue is sparse, and the background music is often subdued and used mostly in pivotal moments where the narrative progresses. With periods of extended silence, music used in such a way acts almost like an additional signifier to alert the player that they should pay special attention. Silence, punctuated by music, to mark the end of one chapter as the next chapter begins. As Claude Debussy would suggest, music is the silence between the notes. As the player, it's up to us to interpret the silence between the notes. One of Eco's most iconic moments, for me, is when the player chooses to save their progress. Rather than use a traditional floating point marker or some sort of beacon, the save point is a mere sofa. Eco simply chooses to sit and rest while actioning Yorda to do the same. It's a small moment of considered game design that reflects the nature of the environment and creates a more immersive world by doing so. A well-deserved rest, an ability for the characters to breathe and take in their surroundings. This then leads me on to another Japanese concept, the concept of Ma. In an interview between Roger Ebert and Hayao Miyazaki, they discussed Hayao Miyazaki's unique take on Ma. Roger Ebert went on to say, "Instead of every movement being dictated by the story, sometimes people will just have to sit for a moment where they will sigh or look in a running stream or do something extra, not to advance the story, but to give the sense of time and place and who they are. Miyazaki, we have a word for that in Japanese. It's called ma, emptiness. It's there intentionally. At this point, Miyazaki claps his hands. The time in between my clapping is ma. If you just have non-stop action with no breathing space at all, it's just busyness. But if you take a moment, then the tension building in the film can grow into a wider dimension. If you just have constant tension at 80 degrees all the time, you just get numb. There are many examples of ma throughout cinema history. Have a look at this scene from Spirited Away. As another example, have a look at this Takeshi Kitano film, A Scene at the Sea. Characters are often allowed little moments to pause in their surroundings. We as the viewer are allowed to breathe with the character. In Eco, we as the gamer are allowed to breathe with the character. Eco is fearless in its commitment to ma. It being a distinctly Japanese concept, I often wondered how Western audiences would take to it. After all, the #1 selling game at the time of Eco's release was Grand Theft Auto 3. Considered a defining moment for games, and another step in the direction of showcasing video games as an art form, Eco has left a lasting impact on the gaming industry. Littered with little quiet moments of grandeur, it has lost none of its charm 19 years later. It's also evident that those charms have not been lost on other game designers, influencing titles such as Brother, A Tale of Two Sons, Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Journey, and many others. On subtracting design, and by extension minimalism, how can you as a designer, writer, artist, create your work in such a way that minimalism fits your context and benefits those that consume your work? Minimalism is about intentionality, not deprivation. It's not important to tell the details of the story. In Japan, there is a poetic expression called a haiku, where you don't explain some things in detail and let the receivers understand or use their imagination with what is presented. That lets the receivers make their own story from their imagination, and I think this is also a good style of expression for video games at this moment. Fumito Ueda, lead designer and director of Eco.
Are you sending that to Mum?
No, but here, I want you to do me a favour.
What?
I want you to talk into the mic. Okay?
Please like this video. Please like this video. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.